it's largely about relationship building, and just working. I think getting human resources that's really actually a good example, because one of the areas that one of the constituencies that I think a lot of people ignore in their marketing plans are the internal audiences. What about the employees, and what role do they play in this process? And even if it's not stuff that they're quote unquote doing, they need to be aware of it. They need to be in the loop. They need to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So establishing relationships with parts of the organization that on their face you wouldn't think would have much to do with marketing is really critical. And there's no, at least based on my experience, it's largely just around the relationships, right? And reaching out and being proactive and saying, look, guys, in fact, at M&T, the HR story is actually a pretty good one, because the bank historically, in its earliest days, as an employee, I would sit there and say, I kind of get the sense that the guys on the 19th floor, their attitude is sort of, what employees don't know won't hurt them. But there was never really a proactive effort to let employees know what was happening around the organization. So the bank started doing these annual surveys, biannual surveys of employees, all these dimensions, right? Employee satisfaction kind of stuff. And what was coming back was communication within the organization was like the lowest performing dimension on the survey. So a lot of people, guys in the 19th floor, were scratching their heads saying, well, geez, how could that be? And it's like, I'm sitting there thinking, like, well, guys, I can tell you how it could be, because that's the reality. Like, stuff happens around here and employees have no idea. You read about an acquisition, a major acquisition that the bank has done, you read about it in the paper on Saturday. What? I walked out Friday, had no idea. And on Saturday morning, I found out that the bank is twice as big. I mean, that's ridiculous. That can't happen. So of course, people are going to say, how's communication in this organization? Oh, it's great. I mean, yeah. So we in marketing looked at that and said, wait, this is silly. Like, this has to stop. We're professional communicators. We know how this works. This bank is ignoring the most important constituency it has, its own employees. We're just going to stick our noses in this. So we called up HR and said, guys, can we just get together and talk about this? We had the survey results, and we said, we think we can help. Like, we're pretty good at talking to people, but most of the people that we talk to are customers and people outside the bank. If we took that same discipline, that same approach, develop an internal communications plan, just like our external communications plan, we think we'd be well served. And they said, okay, give it a shot. They were probably a little skeptical. They weren't quite sure. Like, we need some marketing people. They don't know anything about human resources, right? And we didn't. But like, for instance, the bank was about to do away with its pension plan, right? Which most organizations have, and they go to 401k. So the whole defined benefit pension concept is a foreign concept in most organizations now. And the bank was about to get rid of theirs. And they had this big project, to make that happen, and this human resources project. And communications was on the list, but somebody, like, it was like the last thing on the list. Like, oh yeah, we got to tell people about this too, don't we? It's like, oh God, this is going to be a disaster. So that's the project we stuck our noses in and said, guys, could you let us develop a communications plan to support this, the change of our pension program to a defined benefit program to a 401k? And we did, and we actually ended up winning an award for the communications around that program, because it wasn't nothing particularly inspired as far as what we did, but it was just the discipline. It was the act of planning. It was the act of sitting down and saying, what's the story around this plan? Who do we need to tell it to? And how are we going to tell it in a way that's going to be compelling? And how are we going to deal with employee questions and concerns? And thinking about, my God, like, if I'm a 20-year employee or a 30-year employee who's close to retirement, what am I going to think? Is this going to affect me versus somebody who just started last week? Who they were, and absent that thoughtful, disciplined planning approach, I don't know. I think it would have been a disaster. But I don't think it's unreasonable to say, or I don't think it's too egotistical to say that because of our intervention, we were able to make what could have been a pretty bad situation, a negative phenomenon. You're losing something, right? And you're going to have to contribute, your own money to this 401k, to something that was more positive. So that's just an example.